Recently, OpenAI announced that it was going to test the idea of bringing advertisements to ChatGPT. It's a move being made in part because of mounting costs, and this is seen as a way to recoup some of the invested money. The ads will look to target adult users of the free tier and the $8 per month tier, but that brings up many questions of how this will actually play out and the principles that many companies have to follow when you're talking about placing ads on TV or on the internet. Pleasure to be joined as we are every month to speak about AI with Stefano Puntoni, professor of marketing here at the Wharton School and also co-director of the Wharton Human AI Research Program. Stefano, great to catch up again. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Thanks, Stan. Good to be here.
Thank you. All right. So when you hear this announcement, your thoughts are what? I mean, because obviously OpenAI is thinking about this from a business perspective, but there are obviously, I think, probably some concerns out there as well.
Well, it was in a way inevitable. I think you had to expect OpenAI to have to essentially find ways to monetize a free plan, which is incredibly popular. There are hundreds of millions of people using it. And right now it's making no money to the company, and that cannot last forever. And so there are two ways, basically, to do that. One will be to increase the number of people who upgrade to the paid plan. And they will try to do that, for example, by introducing a lower tier called ChatGPT Go for only $8 a month, and hopefully, increase also the number of people who decide to sign up to ChatGPT Plus, the more expensive plan, or even more expensive one than that. But essentially, the alternative to that is advertising. That's the only way we know, essentially, to make money on the internet. And the share of people who are going to be willing to pay is probably going to be fairly small. So we should probably expect hundreds of millions of people to basically, you know, be exposed to ads in ChatGPT. And the moment that ChatGPT does it, it's likely that other chatbot platforms will follow. So we'll see a bit how that evolves.
So I mentioned at the top, the reports say that they're going to try and make sure that this focuses on adults. But I think anytime we're talking about the use of internet and technology, the question of could this potentially impact kids who obviously are going to use Chat GPT as well? Could they potentially be impacted and be targeted and have their data picked up by companies?
Yeah, that's one area of concern. The sign up process for ChatGPT right now is very basic, very little validation, verification, and that may have to change. The probably depends a little bit on the regulator. What's interesting about chatbots interaction is that because of the rich conversational nature of the data they're collecting in these interactions with users, they probably can have quite a good sense for who is a person, even when they don't have that much information about them in the sign up process. And so that's one open question, to see whether there are technology tools to basically enable the enforcement of that principle.
How do you think this impacts the world of advertising and maybe even more so digital advertising as we
Oh,
move forward?
this is a big thing. I mean, it's chatbots like ChatGPT have become incredibly popular among consumers, and so in terms of the amount spent and the persuasiveness of those conversations is really quite incredible, especially considering that ChatGPT was only launched in November 22. Now, if you think about the digital advertising ecosystem, there are different formats, different ways of doing ads on the web. The most famous and prominent are really search advertising and social media advertising. Basically, these are the corners of the advertising space that have been basically dominated by Google and by Meta. And the question then would be, how does chatbot advertising, or conversational AI, as I call it, relate to those? And I'd say, if you think about the sales funnel, where you start with basically consumers who might be aware, maybe considering some products, but not having very explicit intent to buy. Then you go down the funnel, people develop that intent, eventually they buy and become loyal customers. That's basically the sales funnel. And what a marketing manager is essentially striving to do is to guide people along that funnel. Well,
Right.
social media advertising is occupying the top of the funnel. Right? So you have people who are, talking to friends, browsing any kind of random materials, cat videos, or whatever it may be, and then they get exposed to ads for this and that product, obviously based on information about the browsing behavior, personal characteristics, and things like that. But essentially, it's not. It's more like mass media ads in that sense that you are not there for buying anything most of the times. While search ads are very different. Search ads are really at the bottom of the funnel because you're going on a search engine and typing in keywords that the companies are bidding on to serve you ads, because
Right.
those keywords are presumed by the company to be revealing of a given intent or predisposition. And so you are clearly signaling that you are in the market for whatever it is that the company is advertising. And so in a way, it's interesting that you have these massive companies developing in the ad space, and they've kind of positions at opposite end of the sales funnel. And I suspect that you can see chatbot advertising as sitting somewhere in the middle between the two, in that it's kind of like you're there doing a lot of different things on ChatGPT, and it's conversational and social. So in that sense, it might remind you a little bit of social media advertising. At the same time, you are prompting the chatbot with a query. And that query is probably directly picked up by advertisers to decide what to serve you an ad. And so
Right.
that contextual expression of intent and a need is making it more similar to search advertising. And so probably I would think of chatbots as a middle of the funnel kind of. And I've seen only one paper that has very early data on the referral value of chatbots referrals. And it seems like in terms of revenues per session, right now ChatGPT sits somewhere in between social media and search. So in that sense, seems to confirm this middle of the funnel position. Over time, of course, as people spend more and more time on chatbots, that position might impinge more on both the top and the bottom of the funnel.
And so probably not a big surprise then when we hear this announcement made, that one of the other announcements being made recently is the fact that it looks like OpenAI is going to go for an IPO, an initial public offering, and go public at some point later this year. And maybe it is a case where they will see a quarter or 2 quarters of how this advertising platform works and how well it is received or not received, and then make that final decision about going for the IPO.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Wall Street Journal broke this story a few days ago where they said that OpenAI is talking to Wall Street bankers about an IPO in the fourth quarter of this year. And I think you should read both that process and the announcement of ads in ChatGPT as part of that same path, where basically the company needs to demonstrate and display the fact that it can monetize that massive user base before they can expect a successful IPO.
What then do you want to see or need to see from OpenAI as they start to develop this process so that it ends up being obviously they want it to be one that's financially successful. They want it to be one that works with the consumer as well, but that it doesn't interfere with the daily process that a person is going through in terms of using it. You want it to be a positive experience, not a negative one.
Yeah, so if you look back at the statements by Sam Altman about advertising, up to relatively recently, he was very negative about the idea. He was even presenting it as a nightmare scenario to have
Yeah.
basically advertisement in ads. Apparently, people change their mind, and but there are obvious risks because if OpenAI would go the same way that Meta and other social media companies have gone, where everything and only thing they care about is engagement, and you can see potentially the risk for mental health and society, where an incredibly powerful and persuasive chatbots want you to be there all the time. Okay, and so there is that risk. And in that sense, I was very happy when I read the news by OpenAI. I think the advertising principles that they announced, they are very good, and it's hard to imagine them being better. In fact, so, for example, one of the key principles, they call it long-term value, which is they do not optimize for time spent on ChatGPT.
Right.
That is a big deal. That's a big deal. If they can stick to that, I think that's going to be much more likely that advertising power business models are going to just be very good for consumers, making available for free, an enormously useful technology, supporting the AI ecosystems and continuous investment and improvement in the area, and at the same time, making sure that this doesn't wreck, people's mental health and whatever. So I think in that sense, I was very happy. I think it's quite impressive that the company did this. The question, obviously, moving forward is, can they stick with it, and what does it
Right.
mean? Because it seems that some of the principles they have announced, including answer independence, saying the answers are not dictated by who's advertising, or privacy settings, or this we do not optimize for engagement. They are very admirable, but they do seem to go in direct opposition to short-term financial incentives, where there is an incentive to optimize for engagement and gaining more eyeballs and more advertising space to sell to people. And so, in that sense, we'll have to see how this gets implemented.
Stefano, great to talk to you as always. We will catch up again with you next month.
Thank you, Dan.
You got it. Stefano Puntoni, marketing professor here at the Wharton School and also co director of the Wharton Human AI Research Program.